John Bolton, you're fired. Maybe. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is indeed the Progressive Soapbox. And I've done this video kind of once before where I was listening to the chatter of people asking whether or not John Bolton was going to be fired from his job because he kept either undercutting or trying to one-up Donald Trump. There was a clear contention between the two people, one being the president and the other guy being the guy who was hired by that president, where there was a friction that was bubbling over into the pages of things like the New York Times and some of the press. Apparently, this is not just mainstream media, this is also right-wing media, where these guys are hearing chatter that the president is displeased with John Bolton, that he is unhappy with John Bolton, and he greatly dislikes this notion of bumping heads with this guy over and over again on this issue of Ron. Now, you can make the argument of saying, well, if you put a mad dog on a chain, you can't be mad that the mad dog, how the mad dog acts while he's on that chain. John Bolton is a lunatic. It was understood that John Bolton was a lunatic. I don't understand why Trump wasn't clear on that front. But now Trump is apparently becoming aware of that. What insiders are telling John Kiriakou, and John Kiriakou is the one that is coming out with this, and he wrote this story for Consortium News, and the argument is basic. Donald Trump is displeased with Bolton. Now, when Bolton was asked about this, Bolton in somewhat of a backhand way acted as if there was this kind of grand conspiracy in order to kind of castigate him and to create friction between the president and him. It's not a grand conspiracy. You guys are just not on the same page. When Donald Trump got into office, he went with this notion of, I don't want to get embroiled in wars and I want to bring us out of the wars that we're in. That's what I said I was going to do. That's what I want to do. While wanting to do that, Bolton clearly has a different policy goal. He is a fanatic on the issue of Iran. And so these two are bumping heads on the issue. So in one case, Donald Trump said he's willing to speak with I'm unclear on whether he was talking about the Ayatollah or whether he was talking about the president, Rouhani, but he's willing to speak without any preconditions. Now, you would imagine that John Bolton's head exploded when he heard this. When North Korea, Kim Jong-un, when a missile was fired, and Bolton comes out and says, that's a clear violation, and Donald Trump said there was no violation. I don't know what he's talking about, there was no violation. This is bumping head. You're bumping heads with the President of the United States. That's a problem. Now, I've made an argument earlier that John Bolton is bulletproof. Providing he doesn't do anything insane, he is bulletproof up until the point of the next election, where either Donald Trump loses or he gets replaced, especially if he can't get on the same page. But my point is, he can't change his horse before that election. He may minimize him. He may push him to the side to some degree. But the problem is, if you change John Bolton, if you fire John Bolton, and you put somebody else in that position, it gets across that your policy on Iran failed. And you know what the Democrats are going to be running on? Donald Trump failed. Not running on, but you will be continuously tagged on this notion that you had that maniac running the policy for Iran and that you failed in your policy on Iran in that case. Presidents don't like to come back and say they failed and screwed up on a particular policy, especially a policy that injures tens of thousands of people in that country. Sanctions. Sanctions are an act of war. We're stopping them from getting certain medications, certain drugs, certain equipment. Think of like dialysis supplies. Like, what we're doing is horrendous. What we're doing is horrendous. But the basic argument is, that's the basic argument. These guys are bumping heads. Now, John Kiriakou says this. He says, I have a lot of friends throughout Washington. As you remember, Kiriakou used to be a spook. He was a counterintelligence guy for the CIA. He says, those friends, when you get them a few drinks in them, those friends tell you things. And what they tell you is that Trump is unhappy. And that silently, behind the scenes, Mick Mulvaney is silently looking for people that can take John Bolton's position. They're making the point that John Bolton may be silently given his walking papers. This is not necessarily a fact of sorts. This is one of those things that apparently is taking place behind the scenes. This is consortium news that is coming out with this. And just let me show the point. Here's what my friends are saying. Trump is concerned, like any president, is near the end of his term about his legacy. He said during the campaign he wanted to be the president who pulled the country out of its longest wars. He wanted to declare victory and bring troops back from Afghanistan and Iraq. He hasn't done that, largely at the insistence of John Bolton. Here, we are 3 years later, and we're still stuck in those countries. Second, my friends say that Trump wants to end the involvement in the Yemen war, but Bolton has been insistent that the only way to guarantee closeness of the United States' relationship with Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates is to keep providing the country with weapons, aerial refueling planes, and intelligence support. Essentially, like, Donald Trump wants to get out of these wars and so forth, but John Bolton isn't letting him. I am not buying that one iota. That part. No, and let me explain what I mean by that. Yes, I do think Trump wants to get out of those wars. The reason why I think that is because they were writing hit pieces on him about it. But the hit piece was odd. From the perspective of a lefty, it's like, yeah, good, we want him out of those wars. But the piece was hitting him for trying to get out of those wars. Of course, with as always the specter of the Russians that want him to do so. Meaning, it's Vladimir Putin that wants Trump out of those countries. So Trump doesn't have any agency in this process. If he wants to get people out of the country, the first thing that they scream is that the president is acting at the interest of the Russian government in order to pull troops out of Syria, something that he said he was going to do anyway. So that's his point. The president wants to do it. Bolton doesn't let him. I don't know if I fully buy it, but maybe. I think he wants to do it, yes. To the degree that he wants to do it, I'm not sure. Whether or not he wants that Yemen bill to go through and pull those troops out of Yemen, I don't know. That may be president's discretion. Like, there may be something that a president will want to have discretion on. Even if he wanted to bring the troops out of Yemen, it may not necessarily matter. He may not want Congress forcing his hand to do so. So maybe. But the interesting part here is the end. It's right here. Trump said just a week ago that he was willing to begin talks with Iranians with no preconditions. This was a major softening of U.S. policy towards Iran, and it immediately drew Bolton's ire. Indeed, the New York Times pointed out that the policy directed overruled a longtime goal of Trump's national security advisor. All of this has made Trump angry. He's constantly being one-upped by one of Washington's swamp monsters he promised to rid the city of. He finally seems to have come to realize what the establishment Republicans dislike and distrust John Bolton. And now he understands why. Essentially, they distrust Bolton. This is why. Mick Mulvaney, Trump's chief of staff, has very quietly and discreetly begun informal meetings with a list of half dozen possible replacements for Bolton. Let's hope he finds one that he and both Trump like sooner rather than later. Now he's calling this piece Bolton's long goodbye. He's trying to say that Bolton is on his way out. Bolton may be on his way out, but I still suspect that Bolton is not going to be on his way out until after re-election. I think it's too risky for Trump to get rid of Bolton before. And by the way, this is not because I want him to keep Bolton. I want Bolton fired today. If he could fire Bolton right now while I am on the air, I'd play it. It would be awesome. But I'm talking about this from the standpoint of Trump and from the standpoint of a president running in a re-election. And I think it's I don't think you want to add to your arguments by firing somebody who is such a high profile in your policy on Iran. It just gets across that your policy utterly and completely failed. And that's the last thing you want to do when you're running in a presidential election. After that election, yes, Bolton is fair game. Before, I don't see it. But that said, he's calling it Bolton's long goodbye. And it's not something that's being overt. It's something that apparently is being discreetly handled behind the scenes. Oh, it's fascinating. It's fascinating. Couldn't happen to a more horrible person. So I'll end this here because this was not the video I intended to do. I have another video coming up dealing with what has taken place in the UK. All of these videos for this point have been in American. So let's do the news. Let's jump across the pond. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and you can always support this content through PayPal or Patreon. Thanks all.